Hello, and welcome to Templar On The Run, the podcast pulling back the veil of Freemasonry and shining its light wherever we can. This is Brother Bryce Baker with
Brother Wayne Ross, and we are both from Meridian 47 in Meridian, Idaho. Thank you for your interest in the world's oldest fraternity. And welcome back, and happy 2024 out there. We are here, Templar On The Run, minus one of our Templars who's down. He just started a new job where he's sort of in a new petri dish of children at a school, and I think he got coughed on a couple times too many. But we wanted to keep our schedule here, so this is Brother Wayne Ross from Meridian, Idaho, Meridian number 47, holding down the fort today with our guest in a series of 3 episodes that we're going to be doing throughout this brother's journey in our lodge, and we'll get to introducing Brother Adrian in just a minute here. But before we do that, just wanted to hit a couple of milestones that we were looking at just over this past couple of days here. This is our first episode of 2024, and as of yesterday, we've had 1,005 plays on Spotify, which is awesome, and we have 107 followers, which I've said multiple times on here. It's like I could never imagine growing up in the 80s and 90s that my voice would be transferring all over the world and actually having people listening in and things like that. We've got, of course, Spotify for podcasters gives us a lot of breakdown on our information, so it's pretty cool. You can see where your listeners are coming from. And, of course, the majority of our listeners are from the U.S., the U.K., Australia, Germany, and the Netherlands. But we're picking up countries all the time. So we just want to thank those people in Albania, Croatia, and Malawi for taking a listen. I don't know how long they listen, but at least they clicked us on at some point. So we are here today with Brother Adrian Lane from Meridian 47, one of our newest members, still an Entered Apprentice, but soon to be working on his way to Fellowcraft. So Brother Adrian, why don't you say hi and give us a little bit of background about yourself, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. As was mentioned, I'm Adrian. I live here locally in Meridian, and I have a wife and 2 young children. They're 3 and 5. And I've always been interested in finding new groups to join, and so Freemasons was, when I was much younger, something that stood out to me. But at the time, I just wasn't ready to engage in anything like that, and there were financial reasons as well. But I ran into Bryce through the gym, and I saw his ring, and that's what piqued my curiosity all over again. Mm-hmm. So that's how I ended up connecting with you all. Outside of that, I'm in the IT industry. That's the easy way to say it. But yeah.
Okay, so sort of the purpose for this, as I said, is we've spoken to other brothers who had just finished up like their Master Mason degrees, but we've never really tracked the progress. So we sort of wanted to see what it's like going from step to step kind of a thing, and what you're getting, if you think it lives up to the hype or the expectation or anything like that, or if there's something in particular that sort of struck you, as you know, by being our friends and our brothers, you know how we run this podcast. We say almost everything possible. If it's in English, we say it, like today. But if it's something that's coded or anything like that, we can just sort of hem and haw around it. But so you said early on, prior to the meeting Bryce when you were younger, what do you think it was? Was it a family thing? Was it a movie? What was it how did you know or learn about the craft?
That's a great question. So when I was much younger, in my early 20s, I was very interested. Well, I would say even earlier than that, probably late teens into early 20s. I was always interested in exploring themes along the purpose of life, deeper spiritual connections, understanding esoteric connections, philosophy and things like that, things that allow me to kind of engage with myself in kind of an external factor, just kind of encourage introspection. And among many things, Freemasonry was one of those things that came out. And, at the time what it was a framework. There was a framework that was part of being part of this group, and the idea of being being with like-minded individuals in that respect, looking for ways to continuously focus on self-improvement, was a compelling factor. So that's how I found Freemasonry. It was just more of a search, an open-ended search for frameworks, groups, organizations, philosophies, approaches to just self-improvement.
And we're going to touch on those a little bit later too, some of those other things that we've talked about, so on and so forth. But as you're finishing up the first degree here and having to recite your proficiencies to move on, have you found anything difficult to work with? Have you found anything, is it, outside of it, is it a time difficulty? How do you find the whole process as you're moving forward? Because everybody's journey is a little bit different, but and we get a lot of people, and you look on Reddit all the time, and hopefully they're not bots, but you just see all these people all the time. Oh, I'm going for my degree. They're having all these questions. So there is plenty of question out there, and So have you had any stumbling blocks, either with the information that you've been given, or?
No, I would say on the contrary. I'm a manager and leader in my business, and I take my role as a father very seriously, and I'm always looking for ways to improve on those fronts as well. And so I do a lot of reading on parenting, and I do a lot of reading on leadership, and just generally being a good servant leader. Common themes are humility and respect, self-regulation, discipline. Those are all themes that are common throughout, and what I've found is that Freemasonry thus far is very much in line with those same themes. So I would say no, not at all. No stumbling blocks, I would say. The opposite. It's very reinforcing. It's another element, another layer, another facet to look at a lot of the elements I'm trying to build within myself so that I can be better on all those fronts.
And besides some of the words that we have that we don't use at all in our normal speaking days, is there anything about the memorization? Is that difficult for you or not? Because we always try to find out, because we bring a lot of guys in, but not a lot continue on. How do you find the memorization work?
That's a great question. The only challenge for me personally with the memorization is not that the memorization is hard in and of itself. It's just not a muscle I've used very much.
Right.
So it's getting used to that and then finding that balance in how much time and energy I need to spend in that to make sure that I'm maintaining that forward momentum.
Yeah.
So what I found is that when I'm consistent, the gains come observably. When I'm not consistent, then the rework. Then it's, okay, where was I? Oh, I'm not where I was. I'm going to roll it back a little bit, and you're my mentor or coach. And so, you've been able to see that time or two. So,
yeah.
But I would say the memorization work is really not that challenging. But again, I know different lodges, at least here, have, I want to say, different pressures on how you should approach what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. And we decided too when you joined in, because of our schedules and stuff, that Brother Bryce, being at the same gym with you, SPG in Boise, being able to be together and stuff like that, we'd split time doing the coaching and everything like that. And the only thing that I've found is, and I think most guys nowadays do it too, and you do it a little bit too, is you replace the word for another word that we're used to.
Yeah,
but that doesn't pass because we're supposed to do it exactly like the word, right? So it's like
we were just talking the other day. The word, I don't even remember which word we were talking about, but the word carried gravity just by itself.
Right.
And I was missing most. It was like. Yeah, like the word, something, think best, right? The best. There is no better than best. Best is best.
Right.
So why would you say the most best?
Right.
It was kind of one of those silly scenarios. So yeah, no, totally. In some cases, the language is not necessarily intuitive.
Yeah.
But that being said, that's where the rote practice comes in. So
yeah.
And somebody or some method that enables you to catch it, because I'm not catching it when I'm doing it. the only way I can catch it is if I have that feedback mechanism.
Right. And you also spoke about the esoteric search that you've pretty much been on for quite some time. And, as you go more and more, you're going to learn more how much we just really employ those physical tools that physical craftsmen, operative craftsmen use. We employ them internally. So it's symbolism and it's allegory, and it's really simple, which is, I think, some people mistake. They don't think it's as simple as it is, but in its simplicity is, I think, the value. Then anybody can apply it, because you said, well, you work in IT and I'm a teacher here, and we've got guys who are in all different types of industries. So this isn't, and Bryce and I have hit on this many, many times, this isn't only for the political elite or the people with money or the people who went to Harvard. This is for everybody, because we can all pull things from the tools. We may get bogged down in some of the ritual and some of the wording and everything, but if we were supposed to really apply those working tools, like in the first degree here, that 24 hours of a day, 24-inch gauge, how are you going to break up that time? What are you going to do with that? And then how are you going to spread that out to others? That's something that all of us can apply in our jobs and in our homes, and just stop wasting time, like I'm very, very bad at night, watching TV instead of reading, or other things I could be doing. But those tools are going to be something, I think, that you're really going to latch onto, especially as you move through the second and third and start to put them all together. I think you'll get a nice thing out of that. So
I'll just add one more note to the memorization. There is a practical benefit to that too, just as a skill. Like, for example, for my job, there are frameworks, compliance requirements, procedures, all kinds of fun stuff, and there's a lot of sequencing involved in that. And one thing I really struggle with, just because I don't rely on memorization nearly as much as I used to, is I'm getting better just from having to force myself to work through memorization techniques and patterns. Okay, hey, this this phase of planning has a 4-step approach. What are those 4 steps? Oh crap, let me go grab my notes, or can I Google it, or whatever. It's like, now I'm starting to actually retain a little bit more from the studying that I do to just do my job better too. So there is that practical benefit too.
Yeah, you're flexing that muscle now, right? Like you were just saying earlier. Just need to there we go. Just looking at something there. Okay. And we've talked a lot about tools in our episodes and stuff like that, and I think that'll be a good one for down the road when we talk to you. Like I said, the thought bubble for this was to really follow your progress after each degree, and see what things you're picking up, see if your commitment is even stronger after you go through, because that's what we find. If a guy goes into the second, he's going to finish his third. It's this gap between the first and the second where they just,
fair enough. And
a lot of it, I feel, is the memory work, and it not being like on National Treasure. It's not like this stuff,
I'm still holding out.
I know. So am I. It's been 19 years almost, so I'm still holding out. So, but there was one part that I wanted to hone in on today, and the reason is because it's not a part of your proficiency work either. The portions that you're doing, your obligation, your tools, the lambskin, and the grip and the word and all that, those are all those things that we hit all the time, like a lot of repetition. But we have these 4 virtues that are at the very end of the lecture. And I don't know how much you remember from the lecture. It's long. It's like 9 pages. And depending upon who's giving it, tone could be good or not or whatever. But it's a lot of information. And if you don't go back and look at it again in your booklets or any of that kind of stuff, it sort of like falls off until you see somebody else go through it. And you're like, oh yeah, that was that. I remember that. So what I was going to do today is I sort of made some connections for myself for each of the four, and I wanted to see where your thought process was before I blabber my own thought there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to read from our book here as much as I can, and I'll just stop where I can't stop, where the little words turn into letters and code. But we have four: temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice. And this was literally the very last part of your lecture. And the first one is temperance. Temperance is that due restraint upon the affections and passions which renders the body tame and governable, and frees the mind from the allurements of vice. This virtue should be the constant practice of every Mason, as he is thereby taught to avoid excess or the contracting of any licentious or vicious habits, the indulgence in which might lead him to disclose some of those valuable secrets which he has promised to conceal and never reveal, which would consequently subject him to the contempt and detestation of all good Masons, ... So, looking back at that again, what do you, or does it make you think of anything? When I first heard the word temperance, I thought of temperance movements, but I don't think it's that literal. What kind of anything, first thing off the top of your head, does it sound like something else to you, or what do you get from that little bit?
Not to be too on the nose, but it's very much in alignment with how I chose to start this year, as a matter of fact.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I know we've talked a little bit about it, but I'm doing a dry January, which is very common, right? No booze. But I was up to almost a pot of coffee a day, and I'm not making strong coffee. I mean, it's not thick, but needless to say, I was drinking up to almost a pot of coffee a day, and I was still hitting that afternoon slump, and I was like, I got to do something here. So
yeah.
I was like, why not just double up dry January and just eliminate caffeine from my diet? So I think that's a nice little microcosm of temperance, in a sense, right? We recognize an imbalance, something that is off kilter to excess. And we need to make corrective actions to bring that into alignment. Not to say we need to eliminate that thing. This is not a straight edge concept, but it's finding the balance. The pendulum is always swinging, and temperance, to me, means working to bring that pendulum back to center, but having the cognizance and the self-awareness to do so. And that's where concepts like discipline and other supporting elements come into play.
Right.
That's me.
And it's pretty much in line with what I was thinking, but I was going outside of the physical book and outside of all those other kind of ideas, and I was sort of connecting it to the mental. All of our collective mental resource. Wherever we pull our learning, our education, whatever the case may be, this piece to me in particular, it's mental. To not drink alcohol or coffee or whatever for a month, that's mental. It's the brain, right? The body's hurting, but it's the brain. It's the register, right? Yeah. It conducts everything. So I'm almost seeing this like, the chakras up and down the body. This is like the whole head illuminating in that kind of an aspect. Just being able to think of these things that you're using this as a method, but you're like 2 steps ahead in that kind of an aspect. Not going blindly out into the world, like you said, frameworks, just like with your job or with this. It's not willy-nilly.
No.
We spoke with a pastor from next door to us who broke down each of the Bible passages that we use when we use the biblical passages, which to me is very important to know what source it came from, because there's one that I'm not going to say now, but because you're not in your second yet, but in the second degree, we borrow from somebody else, and those are the only people we borrow from. So why did we borrow it? We said, well, it wasn't close your eyes and pick in the book. It was thought, right? So that's sort of where I was going in this aspect of thinking about it, of the, it's sort of even the first part of temperance is temporal. So, just having that proper mindset and being able to switch that on and off, which is what you're doing now, right? Because you're only 3 days away from the end of the month. And you can then determine if on February 1st, if you're just going to down a pot of coffee, or if you're not. It all depends upon how your body feels and what you want to do with that. So
I was personally thinking Irish coffees all day long.
Well, there you go. It hits both. It hits both. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is. You're right. I am mulling over that to a degree. How I'm gonna proceed once I've achieved my initial goal.
Yeah.
You know? But it is entirely based on how I feel. You're 100% off.
So we can almost do the other three in like a guessing game. So you can sort of also try to think, if you can think what I'm thinking, these other ones actually stand for as well. So in addition to your own input when you hear it, now knowing that I'm thinking mental on the one, there's going to be other lines of reasoning on these others. So the second one, Fortitude, is that noble and steady purpose of mind whereby we are enabled to undergo any pain, peril, or danger when prudentially deemed expedient. This virtue is equally distant from rashness and cowardice, and like the former virtue, should be deeply impressed upon the mind of every Mason as a safeguard or security against any illegal attack which may be made, by force or otherwise, to exert from him any of those valuable secrets with which he has been so solemnly entrusted, which was emblematically represented upon your first admission to the lodge, ... Right? So when you first came in your whole garb, right, you were received a certain way for a certain tactile reason.
Mm-hmm.
Any guess on where I'm going with this? So the first one was mental. Besides thinking I'm crazy.
So just to make sure I'm tracking, are we transitioning into the physical state?
There you go.
Okay.
That's when I read that, it's heavy physical language
Mm-hmm.
in and of itself.
Yeah, but it was still symbolic.
Yes.
In a sense, and it was a test of my mental fortitude,
Mm-hmm.
in a way, or
Yeah.
symbolic of that.
Yeah.
And maybe that's where you were thinking is going with the mental resolve,
Mm-hmm.
Despite external factors, despite physical impressions. The mental fortitude to hold fast to your promises, to your convictions,
Mm-hmm.
Defending your personal positions, within reason. Right?
Yeah.
There's always room for improvement or
Well,
adjustment. But
And there's also, you're over at the SBG and stuff like that, and that is sort of a mindset that you take in martial arts as well. Or
Yeah.
if you're in the military, or if you're in these different kind of circumstances that we don't normally do in our normal lives,
Mhm.
day to day. It's like we always talk about the lodge as something different from your normal life, which it is.
Yeah.
And then these other experiences and existences, if temperance is the mental, for me, then that fortitude is the physical, withstanding, as it says in here, pain, peril, torture, etc., any of those different types of things, to keep strong, to hold on to those things that you were entrusted with.
yeah, that's an excellent point. I think it actually ties into a book that I just completed called The Confident Mind, which is heavy into sports psychology, but there's an emphasis on what the author likes to refer to as the white-collar athlete.
Mhm.
So he's like, even though you're not a Super Bowl quarterback, you can be, figuratively, you're a Super Bowl quarterback in your white-collar, blue-collar job or whatever it is.
Right.
And all of those techniques are about establishing and maintaining mental fortitude, specifically around the concept of negative self-talk and how damaging that is. So I wonder if that overlaps a little bit.
Yeah, and it's, for me, overlaps are always the huge thing too. So it's always like, are we hearing this in other institutions as well, in other thought systems, in different religions? Are we hearing this same kind of concept and this understanding, that we hold to things, and then we can apply that to our job, our families, as we, provide for them on a daily basis, and protecting that kind of an aspect too. Each of these virtues also, they are attached to a physical portion of the body that's, is emblematic of these as well, which sort of connects into, those thoughts about energy and connections and what we have, how as our system runs, through our body and those different kinds of things. So, it's so funny that even the smallest of things within what we work with has philosophical, esoteric pieces to them, without really having to be overt. I don't think that you really have to go digging hard to find any of this stuff when it's in there, if you just, take a minute and reflect and think about it.
Yeah.
And then, see how that's going to lay out. These four almost work with like the tools, I think, in an aspect of that. Like I said, you've got the 2 tools thus far, but as we use those, these are all like tools that we can also employ. We're never gonna, in 2024, I hope, we're never gonna get to a situation where we have to hide who we are and and not divulge this or that or anything like that. It's happened in other parts of the world in the past and currently. Freemasonry is not accepted everywhere, kind of a thing, but currently we still are. So those pieces are there for that extreme, but I think they also give us that opportunity to practice these things on ourselves. And if we internalize it all, if we take it all mental, the temperance, the fortitude, prudence, and justice, and just think about those kind of things and that kind of aspect, it seems to open more doors too. So
yeah.
Prudence is the third one here. Teaches us to regulate our lives and actions agreeably to the dictates of reason. It is that habit by which we wisely judge and prudentially determine on all things relative to our present as well as our future happiness. This virtue should be the peculiar characteristic of every Mason, not only for the government of his conduct while in the lodge, but also when abroad in the world. He should be particularly careful in all strange and mixed companies, never to let fall the least sign, token, or word, whereby the secrets of Freemasonry might be unlawfully obtained. ... Sounds a little bit like your obligation, doesn't it?
Just a little.
Just a little bit, right? And on that one there, how would you define the difference between prudence and temperance? What would you say is a dividing line between those concepts?
I would consider prudence to lean heavily further into a more rigid sense of discipline and self-governance. I think temperance, at least as I understand temperance, is about maintaining balance, equilibrium, but I think prudence implies a little more rigidity. That's how I see the two as being slightly different. One requires a degree of vigilance in a different way. Temperance, we need to be vigilant in the sense that we have to be cognizant and self-aware, but I think with prudence, it's more vigilance through action and consistency and discipline is how I see the difference, but that's just mine.
Yeah. Well, it's those things as, getting those answers and seeing how people think about it, because, even with our own lodge, if you ask some of the guys, they wouldn't have a response for you. They'd sort of have to, let me think about it. And,
When I hear prudent, there's a feeling that I need to get it done right, that I need to be right every time, not ebb and flow.
Yeah.
There's an element of importance in doing the thing, being a certain way all of the time.
Yeah. And I sort of connected almost like that, like varying levels, and I really connected this with the logical mind. So this is everything that is logic oriented, whereas our minds are not always logical, right? Most people see something and they want it, they got to have it. That's not logical if you don't need it. Things that we buy, do you really need that car? No, probably not. I could get by with 4 wheels and whatever, I don't need the Dodge Hellcat or whatever, but hey, if I want it, that's more of the quick think mind. Whereas I feel this one is much, much deeper, into the logical aspects of it, not only because it hits in the very beginning about dictates of reason, right?
Yeah.
Which we hit again into the second degree. That's one of my favorite lectures, that second degree lecture. You're going to get a kick out of it. So, but using those tools, which goes back to something in our past episode we're not taught that. I don't know if you were taught that in school, at least in high school, until you get to college, and if you take a philosophy class or anything like that, you're not taught logic.
No, and I actually learned that the hard way when, I wouldn't say it was like part of my midlife crisis, so to speak, but I was like thinking to myself, what would it take to switch careers and just become an astrophysicist? And then I started looking at the math requirements.
Well, that's a lot.
And I started taking some college algebra, like self-taught college algebra again, just to recap. And it was like, oh, college algebra is 100% proofs, not like high school algebra. And then I was failing all of the logic tests in the pre-work, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to go back to the beginning. And I actually picked up a book and started learning logic, and I had not been taught, to your point, I was not taught the formal systems of logic, how to interpret scenarios, break them down into concise, I can't remember the terms, but you have your predicate and your outcomes and all these things, and I was not taught any of that, and it was a very, very difficult process to get a fundamental understanding of evaluating things in a mathematically logical way.
Right.
100%. No, I thought my intuition was totally sound, and I was very quickly proven very wrong.
And that's a extreme aspect, as opposed to if you're taking like a college course just to fill an art requirement, and you take a philosophy class or whatever. Those teachers know who's in the classes, and and so it's going to be a little bit different, but in something like that where it becomes an application, that is another huge piece to it on top of that, so sort of like, it's like you said, prudent, it's necessary, it's needed right now kind of a thing, but we're not going to get there if we're just using our goofy mind, right? We've got to get in there, we've got to dig in and work on those things.
Maybe I'm picking up another difference between temperance and prudence. You mentioned you see prudence as very logically driven or representing logic, and temperance is maybe that mastering of emotion. That's a really good dichotomy.
Yeah. Well, because you need both.
Yeah, you do 100%.
Yeah.
And there are times when it's necessary to dismiss logic, but yeah.
It happens. So we've gone through the mental, the physical, and the logic. So our last one, justice. Justice is that standard or boundary of right which enables us to render unto every man his just due without distinction. This virtue is not only consistent with divine and human laws, but is the very cement and support of civil society. And as justice in a great measure constitutes the really good man, so should it be the invariable practice of every Mason never to deviate from the minutest principle thereof. And then a lot of dots after that. So, why justice? And is it court justice? I was just going to make reference to a thing that was handed down yesterday, but I don't even want to bring it up. So, we stay away
Probably
from
for the best.
Yeah.
I think that's one of our rules, as a matter of fact.
Well, over there it is. But here we're in free country.
Fair enough.
But why justice? Have you ever thought about that? Why justice, this standard or boundary of right? The language we use there?
I have honestly not put any serious thought into justice as it pertains to Freemasonry. On a personal note, the thing I struggle most with justice is the inference or implication of finality. I think I personally struggle with justice applied in certain scenarios where there are paths to redemption to consider, corrective measures, instructional moments, teaching opportunities, whatever. I mean, I struggle with justice in the sense that I struggle with the path to redemption, or how to allow someone to become whole after they have wronged someone else. That's
the finality of it.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's not to imply that justice imposes finality. Part of our justice system, includes a path to redemption in many cases, and obviously, there are concepts that are unforgivable,
Right.
and that there are no. But that's part of a justice system in my mind, and that's where I don't know how it applies to Freemasonry at all. I haven't really given any thought to that. I'd be curious to hear yours, as a matter of fact, because
Well, it's funny because the slides on the screen land at the right time as I'm clicking through them to deal with this, because in the background behind Brother Bryce and I at the Scottish Rite, on the wall is the setup for what we are doing. We're setting up, we're looking at a cave drawing, essentially, of the Court of the Dead. And in the middle are the scales. And that goes to your idea of justice, because in the ancient Egyptian belief, your life's work was put on one side, your soul and everything you've done, good or bad, was on one side, and a feather on the other. And if you didn't, if that feather moved, you're done.
yeah,
That goes to your concept of the finality.
mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a beautiful symbol,
yeah.
but I wouldn't want to be weighed on that.
I see that as an excellent control symbol.
Oh yeah, very dogmatic, right?
Yeah.
Those Egyptian priests. But it's
With a healthy view.
yeah.
With a healthy view of that symbology, I can see how that would be very helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And to me, this whole thing fell right into spirituality and divine.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimate justice. Whatever we believe, whatever we don't believe, so on and so forth. We never ask brothers what church they go to, so on and so forth. We all have that basic connection of some belief that something that's greater than ourselves, and that thing, I hope we all, in some extent, believe is the final judge.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think everybody believes, probably to some degree, that their life's work will be somehow measured or weighed, whether religious or not.
Mm-hmm.
The same concept of legacy, and just, am I forgotten when I'm gone?
Is that more of a esoteric, or because I know you've researched and gone a lot into different comparative religions and belief systems and stuff like that? Have you found that as like a common thread also within more standardized like church? Like we had the Episcopalian on here, we've had a Buddhist monk on here,
Yeah, I mean, I think there is some universal element to that justice in this spiritual or greater concept. Karma, whether you're talking figuratively or spiritually, or you're talking about being weighed and measured at the end of your life by a spiritual being or some greater power, or whether or not your purpose in life was to make a difference here and now, and how you'll be judged based on what value you brought to the world in your life. I mean, it's at all levels. I think that there's some kind of evaluation of some kind in every aspect, but I don't know if necessarily everybody worries about it.
No, I don't think we necessarily should. It's like it's almost not in our purview.
Yeah.
That we do that. We just try to continue to do the things that we know make an impact.
Yeah.
A positive impact.
It's a strategic focus.
Yeah.
Is a fair way to put it, I think.
Yeah. It's not like we have to always be looking over our shoulder to make sure we're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Because, it's never going to be preached at us that way in lodge either.
Yeah.
The closest we ever get to is things like the hat, or a bumper sticker.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to wear that out in public, you better not get in a bar fight, because it's going to be on TikTok.
Yeah.
And then that's emblematic of Meridian 47.
It might be an interesting recruiting tactic.
You never know. I don't think we need to worry about that right now.
Yeah, fair enough.
Our numbers are pretty good as it is. So when you step back and you take a look at all four of these pieces and laying them out as flat on the paper, or then where I went with them, mental, the physical, logical, and then divine, the spirituality aspect, does it speak to you of something else besides a European tradition passed down to us, or do you have any kind of feel from it when you look at it from that aspect? Or
No, I think that's a really fascinating perspective, because it kind of, I think when you combine those virtues in that way, it sounds like a comprehensive state of being, in a way. You know, you have the physical, the mental, the emotional, the logical, and the spiritual. And I would, just from my hip pocket, that seems like a complete person.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who's thinking about all of those things, or somebody who's focused on areas of their life on all of those fronts, or at least finding answers for themselves, or self-governing, as appropriate. I think that's what speaks to me about those things, is that you're looking at your life at least from a 50,000-foot view, and you're covering all your bases.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about those four things.
Yeah. And to me, too, it also speaks to another one of our symbols that you'll get more acquainted with later on, but we have a lot dealing with spirals and how spirals work for various things. We even had a great education one night about the Fibonacci numbers and seashells and those, and all that kind of stuff. And one thing I think about spiral is that's our lives. You always... You touch back, you're coming back, and it's not like these have to be just like step 1, step 2, step 3. They just sort of wrap, kind of a thing. And maybe we touch back on it again, It was one of our very first episodes. So according to Google Podcasts, those are the ones that were listened to the most. But we talked a lot about the point within a circle. Because Bryce and I were having a different idea than some of our brothers in our lodge and another brother from another lodge, who were saying that they were saying your circle stays the same no matter what. And we were arguing that no, it grows. As your knowledge base grows, it's going to grow. Your realm of experience is not going to stay the same and fit within that circle, as you've added on more layers. If you go through doctoral studies in comparative religions, there's no way your circle is going to stay the same. I don't see how everything would transmute into that one-size circle. It just, now if the circle expands and you're touching on those points, right, that are holding it up, that we talked about, and it's out there anyways. The Saints John is those guiding posts. They can move and let your circle grow, and you sort of keep hitting on them, just like this. It's not like you do this, then you do that. This is sort of like a whole time kind of a spin with things.
Yeah, and that's a fair point, is that they are seemingly all tied together, like, not to sound cliche, but 4 legs of a chair.
Yeah, definitely. So might not have been exactly what you were thinking as we sat down on the microphones here, but
that's okay.
It was just something that I was sort of, playing with these ideas and thinking about, trying to also, the point to this also is people who are listening for the first time are getting more of our stuff firsthand, because they can read it online. They can get all this stuff online and read it, but they're not getting our interpretation after having gone through it.
Yeah,
kind of a thing, right? And you're just beginning in those passages here, because you've had other experiences back and forth where you've had probably very similar types of things that you've looked at and move forward with that. Of any of those ones, real quick here, any of the things that you were talking about, like you had explored in the past and stuff like that, was there any particular reason? Was it like a lack of a framework or something like that sort of dissuaded you from continuing like studies in anything or readings on anything? And also, while I'm saying that, if you have references for people like books or websites of a lot of good information, we like getting those on the list too. So,
yeah, I know. There was one book that I read, and I can't remember the name of it, but I'll provide it to you so you can include it in the show notes. But there was a book that introduced Freemasonry, and I thought it did a really fantastic job of introducing a lot of the core concepts and all that fun stuff. Much in the way that the education nights that you do kind of introduce some of the symbology, some of the formality, just, hey, this is what Freemasonry is, this is what it isn't, this is how we're structured. That was really helpful. But as far as like other teachings and learnings, going back to the first part of your question, I've tried a lot of things. And if I were to list them, I'm sure I'd get some side eyes, but I'm somebody who believes that you have to integrate, you have to explore, you have to experience. I don't think that I can connect with anything without trying to become part of that something. So, I mean, I could read about any religion, I could read about any group, but that's not going to replace experience.
Right.
And I don't think meaningful connections are made without experience. So with that, I've definitely done a few things, joined a few groups, religions, etc., in search of something that aligns with my morality, my worldview, because that's a hard part. I mean, I don't mind being part of anything that challenges my perceptions or my feelings, but what I do appreciate is the opportunity to discuss and explore those. And that's what is unique about Freemasonry, is that so far nothing I've come across is outrageous by today's standards, in my opinion, or requires a dogmatic view. It's not like I have to believe something without evidence or anything. Everything is really centered on tools for promoting healthy introspection and mental growth. Or, depending on your situation, spiritual growth, whatever. I mean, on all of those fronts, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. That's how I've seen the tools of Freemasonry help me so far. What also is compelling is the ability to come up with my own interpretations, and I tend to lean heavily into literal interpretations. That's just my style and how I do, and I'm generally more action-oriented. But I still want to see where I come to when we're talking about very abstract concepts. I mean, where there isn't a clear line to actions or some formulaic approach or some system that I can use to get a deeper connection. No, instead, I've got to have conversations with people like you who have a very different worldview, a very different perspective, to expand my own and help open my mind to different facets to look at those things and maybe make adjustments to my own worldview. As it makes sense. Like that's the compelling part to Freemasonry, I think, that stands out among other things I've tried.
Yeah, and it's not for sideliners. It's not for people just sitting on the fence kind of a thing. It is, because we got a lot of them in Masonry around the world, but there's just so much to it. How can you just sit and not think and not develop? Right?
It's this. I mean, in many ways, it's a similar paradigm to what you see in a church.
Right.
You have those who just want to be told what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and they enjoy being part of the community, and they don't need to go deep. They're happy where they're at, and that's totally okay. But there's opportunity to go further and to dive deeper and to understand more and make more meaningful connections and all that kind of fun stuff. So I like that. Freemasonry allows for that. I enjoy conversations with our brothers and going out and socializing, and that's I'm a social person, and that's another compelling element for me. But what's also cool is that while we're socializing and having fun, we can still talk about some deeper things.
Yeah.
And so I get to satisfy my needs on both fronts. I get to scratch the itch to dig a little deeper and understand myself a little bit more, and also get to hang out, have fun, do escape rooms, drink beer, play trivia, whatever. It's all positives. even the formality of the governing of the lodge is a lot of fun to observe and see. And sure, there's certainly some passionate individuals, passionate takes, but the tenets of Freemasonry allow us to attack ideas and not people, which I think is a beautiful thing. It keeps those virtues, and the tools help us stay focused on what's right and what matters.
Yeah, and that structure, that's one of those things that you can't get rid of, because if that goes away, then the rest of it goes away. The free thought, the exploring ideas and all that kind of stuff. You need that structure. Another picture just popped up at the right time, the structure of the lodge and the tools and the way that it's laid out and the way that the officers run things and do things, and and it's that way for a specific reason. It keeps that in line so that we can do exactly that. We're an institution that allows its brothers to explore and build and create things. Everything from like the motorcycle club, Widow Sons, to parties, like you've seen in the last year, the things that we've done at our lodge and with the community and stuff like that. It's that the structure allows that kind of growth.
Yeah.
And that amount of openness to let the brothers try these things, as long as it is a benefit and not a detriment.
And that's what's great about it. No matter how you want to improve as an individual, whether you're not very good at socializing, whether you're not very good in exercising leadership skills, whether you're not very good in taking more responsibility, whatever it is in your life that you want to improve upon, there's an opportunity to improve that through Freemasonry, which is beautiful. Like I don't have to, if I was an individual contributor and I wanted to start taking on leadership roles, one of the very real elements of becoming a good leader is practicing leadership skills. And if you're not put into a leadership position, it's difficult to come across those opportunities. Freemasonry provides a way to do that. You can exercise leadership in Freemasonry. If you're learning how to make friends and you don't have a social circle, well, guess what? You have a group of brothers to practice your social skills with, and it's in a safe and supportive environment. You're in a position to get that constructive feedback if you want it. It doesn't matter what. Yeah. I think that's what good men being better means. Yeah. And everybody's in alignment on that. Yeah. It's beautiful.
No, definitely it is. And that sort of puts us into that spot where we're coming into the end to wrap this out in this reflection time and a little bit of digging in on some of our more heavily structured pieces, right? Some of these pieces from the lecture there. So wanted to thank you for coming down and appreciate the time. And hopefully next time when we have you for the second, of course, Brother Bryce will be here too. So we'll have all three of us, because his takes on things are at times different than mine too, because we have the different experiences, which is always great to have those ideas back and forth. And I'm sure when we get to your second, both of us will be doing some parts in that as well. So there'll be some things that we'll be able to talk about, and him and haw on the microphone here about things we can't say. But appreciate the time and coming out. And for those of you out there, if you're checking us out on YouTube, thank you for that. Send us a message. If there's something that you had a question about, we're here to answer those questions. And had a brother send us a message just letting us know he was doing forward with his fellow craft in Mexico, so thank you again for sending that out to us. But we've got the rest of our socials up there, everything at Templar On The Run, essentially, except for our Instagram, which is Temp On The Run. But you can find us on Spotify, Reddit, TikTok. Send us an email, question. Check out the YouTube channel, where we hope to be able to continue and run with this platform, because we think it's different than a lot of podcasts, even Masonic podcasts, just because we want as much visibility as possible. There's a lot that people misunderstand, and this is a great platform for, I think, getting rid of some of that. So thank you again for coming down, and we will be seeing all you out there very soon.
My pleasure.
All right, everyone, thanks for listening to Templar On The Run. Please check us out at Twitter and Reddit at Templar On The Run. Our Instagram is at Temp On The Run. We got TikTok at Templar On The Run. And if you have any questions or anything else that you can't reach us on any of those other platforms, please send them to templarontherun@gmail.com. We thank you for listening and have a great day.